Last week, the first ever vessel, Zenwa 28, was received at by the Nigerian Port Authority at the Lekki Deep Sea Port, signaling the full readiness of the port for trading activities in the country. How much will this address Nigeria's trade sector? Professor Ken Ife, the lead consultant industry and private sector development at ECOWAS, joins me now to discuss how Nigeria can leverage this for trade facilitation. Professor, it's a pleasure to have you on the program today. I'm sure many are excited to hear that finally it seems that Lagos DC port is up and running. Fingers crossed on how significant that will be. But in your view, how significant do you think this potentially would be for Nigeria, especially with respect to trade facilitation?
Thank you very much for having me. The deep sea port, the very first in the series that are lining up, will be a major game changer for not only for Nigeria, but for Nigeria's aspiration in the context of Africa continental free trade. But why do I say first? Let's get to grips with the size of the opportunity. If you consider that we have all the ports that we have currently in Nigeria, you have the Port Harcourt, Calabar, Apapa, and Rural Port. If you join all of them together, they are just equivalent to one deep sea port. While, for example, let me explain further. If a Panamax, the size of, this particular Zenhua vessel that came in, is in the order of Panamax. Panamax will carry about 16 to 17,000 containers. And then you have small boats that carry 4,000 containers come there and offload, transship in the high sea. And then that is what actually comes on shore to these our small ports that are usually around 7-meter depth. The type of deep sea port will require about 13-meter depth to allow those kind of ships to come in. So you can now see that already tells you the logistics nightmare that is going to be associated with offloading a 17,000 container port arriving at the ship arriving at the deep sea port. And there are other challenges around it. But the opportunity is that you can now change the game, because Nigeria looks to be a top logistics hub in Africa within the framework of AFCTA. And to do that, we have this Lekki deep sea port in view. We have Ibaka, which is ibom. We have badagry deep sea port, and we have bonny deep sea port. So we already have 4 lined up. But there are other contenders. Bayelsa wants their own deep sea port. Cross River State is working on a Bakassi deep sea port. And then even the One itself is although it's focused on oil and gas, it is also some kind of deep sea port. So you can see the aggregation of that huge array of capacity means that Nigeria will be a destination of choice, and it will offer the cheapest as well as a very effective location for taking in continental vessels from Europe, from America, from Canada, from Brazil, and all of that.
Right. Thank you so much for really helping us appreciate the context of the significance of this development. But then, of course, what else can we anticipate? Because Lagos, for example, now has a deep sea port. In terms of the economy that is associated with a deep sea port, help us appreciate what else goes on around that.
Now, first of all, the seaport is just a facility. It's just a port. So there are certain things, it will reduce cost of trade, trade facilitation, in the sense that they are now going to look at the huge volume will bring the economy of scale. So prices of containers coming in will come down without a doubt. But the capacity that it presents means that you are now going to turn around and say, if you are having all these problems of congestion in Lagos with this smaller number of ports, what are you going to have now that you are going to have a port that is 4 times larger than Apapa Seaport? So immediately you turn your attention to, you need high-speed rail to remove these goods, to evacuate them. So you need to be talking about inland container depots, inland container ports, and custom bonded warehouses scattered all outside Lagos. You can see the one in Ibadan. so that the train will move these goods out over the night when people are sleeping, move all this stuff out so that you don't have a complete halt in traffic
right.
in Lagos. So that's number one. But of course, there are other things that have to come into play. The whole single window that we have been talking about for the last 12 years is now mandatory, because with a single window, we are now going to connect to a regional single window to handle transit goods. So what it means is that you can now assure 24-hour clearance rather than 2 weeks clearance at the current ports. And so you're going to have a speed, far more rapid clearing. Of course, I know that they are talking with IMO, the International Maritime Organization, on the deployment of continental logistics, the community port system, port community system, PCS. But this needs to integrate with national single window so that we can ensure that you have efficiency in that mechanism.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just going to defeat the purpose.
Over a year ago, I remember speaking to the operators of private ports within the Apapa port in Lagos, and it really opened my eyes to the opportunity when you can add efficiency to the process of bringing in goods into the country. They are simply overwhelmed in terms of the demand for their services. But as we try to adopt this deep sea port operation in Lagos, I want to hear from you about the opportunity for the private sector to get engaged, because the deep sea port is only one investment. As you've mentioned, obviously there has to be an investment in rail and transportation infrastructure and logistic infrastructure to make this work. So I wanted to hear your thoughts about the opportunity for the private sector here.
There are one or two more things that I have to add. One thing that makes the port operations and trade facilitation costs come down to the barest minimum is what we call backhaul capacity. Now, backhaul capacity means that, for example, now it costs you about 2,500 naira for dollar to import a container to Nigeria from Europe, say for example. And then when the container is going back, it goes back empty, which means you pay only about $500 for a container to go back. But when you add $500 to $2,500, it comes to $3,000. Now, but if you have backhaul capacity, that is your ability to ship back something, then you will get half of the cost. In other words, it will now cost you 1,500 for the container to come in and 1,500 naira for the container to go out. So then you are really sitting on very low cost and competitive regime. So, but then how do you encourage that with deep sea port coming on stream? One is that some of the big manufacturers in China may come to Nigeria and locate in the deep sea port free zone, or locate in any of our 35 free trade zones, hoping that they can bring in their products, assemble them, and re-export them to America, for example. Now that America is charging them 20% duty into China, they can come and assemble their goods here and send them to America under AGOA with 0% duty and 6,000 tariff lines free, no quota. So you can see it's a huge commercial advantage. But they're not going to take it if they feel that their containers will come and they'll spend 2 weeks before they'll get them out from the seaport, and then they go in, there's no power in the export free zone. They're not coming here.
Right.
They go elsewhere. So there are huge opportunities. Many people will be coming here, exploiting the low cost and competitiveness of our export and manufacturing capacity and infrastructure.
Right. Well,